This video is for the students in my classroom and anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about using a slab roller. This is a really handy piece of equipment that we have in my ceramics room here at the high school. The way that this slab roller is made is it has, first of all, a table surface, and do disregard my signs. I typically keep glazes underneath there, and that's my chart. So it has a table surface that extends on either side of a set of rollers, and it has two pieces of canvas that you sandwich your clay between. If I take this canvas out, I can show you real quickly. So you can see the two rollers that we have here. The bottom roller is not adjustable in height, but the top roller is adjustable in height, and you will find the adjustments right here on either side. There is a little diagram, a little adjuster diagram on both sides, so you make sure that your space of the rollers is even as you're putting it through. The nice thing about using a slab roller is that it does allow you to make slabs that are large and perhaps with a little less effort if you're not very experienced with the rolling pin especially. I personally love using a rolling pin and slab sticks with big pieces of clay, but a lot of my students do find that they enjoy the slab roller quite a bit. So I'm going to start off with a piece of clay that's rather thick. And notice that I do have the roller spread to 1.25 inches. Yes. Now you can use wedged clay, you can use pugged clay, but in the case of this, if I'm going to roll a really big slab, sometimes it's nice to start with clay that is fresh off of the block. For my students, I usually tell them when you take clay directly off of a block and you're going to be rolling slabs, I usually don't actually have them wedge it. Usually if I have them roll a slab, I'll just have them cut a nice even piece and then they can just roll it directly with the rolling pins. Now in the case of this, I am going to be rolling this in the slab roller, and I want to make a fairly large slab. So I'm going to start off with a pretty thick piece because what I can do is gradually go down with my depth of the rollers. So here I wanted to show you what the little gauge looks like, which is connected to the height of the top roller. So you can see that the gauge goes from like a little over 2.25 inches basically down to 0. So you can have any slab rolled an even thickness between those measurements. Now I'm going to start off at 1.25 inches. Now you can see that my clay is thicker than 1.25 inches. Let me just back this out so you can see. It is thicker than 1.25 inches here, but the reason that I'm doing that is I'm just starting off with a thick piece, so when I start rolling it, I can taper the edge as it goes through. I'm going to center that up some. I can taper the edge a little bit and it will fit through a little bit more easily. So I'm going to take my clay and sandwich it between these two rollers. Now, this is pretty big compared to that. So what I usually recommend doing is I'm going to taper this edge, back that out a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to taper that edge so I can get it down to about the 1.25 inches. And I'm going to flip back my canvas. And when you turn this, I usually am holding, can you see that? Yeah. I'm usually holding the canvas on this side. Continue rolling this through until I've passed through both of the rollers. Now, once you've passed through the rollers, you want to flip this up and then what I usually recommend is a rotation. So if you're trying to go with a slab that is more square instead of really long, you want to rotate it, pick it up and rotate it. Now that I've done the 1.5 inches, I'm going to back it down. I'll do 1 3/8 inches. I'm just going to try a pass of 1 3/8 inches. With every pass, you will release your clay and rotate it, and then, of course, lower the roller height. And it's just repetitive. You're doing it over and over. The reason that I'm not going too fast is if you go really fast with a slab, you can end up by causing so much stress that you're weakening it. So I want to go slowly as I'm compressing this, and I also don't want it to be stretched all in one direction. Okay, now you can see it's looking a little bit bigger, and I'm just adjusting roller height again. Now, one nice thing that I didn't mention is when you're getting down to your final thickness, you can actually use some sort of a specific textured cloth if you want to. In this case, this is just my canvas, which is typical for a slab roller, but it will leave a canvas texture behind. There is this thing that's called a slabmat, and it says Herring Designs. I don't know, I've had this for a while. I'm not too sure if the same company still makes it. Let me focus in on this. I will put it in the description of the video if they still make it though. And that's kind of cool because this backside is absolutely texture free. So if you use something like this, in lieu of the canvas mats, you will end up by having a piece with very little texture showing. And sometimes I have wanted texture, so I will actually use a fabric, you know, just something that I've found at the fabric store that's got a really heavy, thick texture to it. And it's kind of cool if that is what you want, if that's what works for you. But for the most part, I'm just using this to roll a slab. So at this point, I'm set at 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to bring it down to my final thickness. For my students, I would assume that most of the time, you're probably doing maybe 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch, depending on what it is that you're making. So I just dropped it down to 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to do one final pass. And there we go. That was my final pass now. And then the last thing that you always want to do to a slab is you want to compress it. Slabs do have a tendency to be perhaps a little bit weaker if they're not well compressed. Rolling it slowly with whether it's a rolling pin or a slab roller, you know, just gently doing a little bit at a time and alternating your directions will help a lot with the compression. But the other key is I'm now using a rib. This is one of the Cheryl ribs, the mud tool ribs, which I have to say I love the mud tools. They don't send me anything or give me anything. I'm just telling you this because I love the mud tools. Great ribs. Oops, what is that? Oh, got my wire cutter underneath there. So here I am compressing both sides of my slab. And when you compress, if you try alternating the directions, what I like to compare this for my students, the reason that we compress or rib anything like this is for strength, whether it's a pinch pot that you're doing whether it's a wheel thrown piece, a coil pot that you're blending, or slabs, you compress it to add strength. So I like to compare it to bricks of a wall. You may or may not know, but platelets are the clay discs. They're shaped like discs, okay? The clay particles are shaped like discs. They're called platelets. And when they're not compressed, they just kind of go every which way in the clay. But when you compress them, it's going to kind of flatten them out and line them up, sort of like bricks in a wall. And that will help to add a tremendous amount of strength. So you always want to rib and compress. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you here, and I'm not building anything out of this, but I did want to show you the trick to picking up a large piece like this. And I'm afraid I'm going to get a little bit of stuff on my sweatshirt because I wasn't thinking I'm wearing long sleeves. So when you're picking up a big piece like this, you want to have a whole lot of surface area to hold it and to carry it. So I often will have my arm, my hand, my finger is spread out. I will lift up the other piece or the other half, and I'm really spreading it out like this because you really want it to be stable. You don't want to pick it up just by the edge, because if you do pick it up just by the edge, it's going to be weak and it's going to rip, kind of like I did that earlier actually when I flipped it over. But if you do have some stretching going on, be sure to rib it again before you're doing whatever it is that you're going to do with your slab. And that's how you use a NorthStar slab roller. I hope you have found this to be helpful. And students, just make sure that you clean it up, you know, put it back the way that it goes. And as a reminder to my high school students, don't ever, ever, ever put anything between the rollers that's not canvas and clay. Don't put tools, don't put pencils, don't play around with it, that sort of thing. We need to take care of this really nice piece of equipment. And that's how you use a NorthStar slab roller. I wouldn't hesitate to buy another one of these. This is actually my third one. I've had it in 2 different school studios and my personal studio. They're really wonderful pieces.